Now let's start the session. Michael, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Eric, and for introducing me, and welcome to everybody on our first session in the hybrid implementations track. I'm going to give you an overview on hybrid implementation today, but before we go into that, of course, we always have our legal disclaimer that this outlines our strategy and that things may change in future. But one thing that's very more important to me is our social media postings. And actually, I saw yesterday evening a nice posting from the colleagues in the Netherlands, how they attend our ALM summit, and it was quite nice to see them all in a room, so and watching us on the TV. So we're really happy that you join us here now virtually in the ALM summit. And if you want to share something, if you have thoughts, use the hashtag ALM summit to communicate with the other participants. Eric already said it, so we have a Q&A functionality in Zoom. If you have any questions during the session, please post them in Zoom. We will try to answer them at the end of the session. And if not, the Meet the Expert, as Eric outlined, will be the opportunity to meet all of the presenters from today's track. And we're going to recap some of the questions. And if you have more questions, of course, you're happy to join and ask their questions there. So what am I going to share today? So actually, I thought this year, let's take a step back. I want to go through hybrid implementation, give you an overview of what needs to be done in a hybrid implementation, and at the end also explain you our best practices that we just published. And then at the end of the session, go through the supporting tools for that. And basically, let's start with an introduction. The ALM is pretty much known to everybody here. I assume you've seen these pictures in many variations. And when we talk about ALM in the area of SAP, we always talk about, first of all, the implementation part, where we go from the design over the build to the test and the deploy. Then we do a handover to operations, where it's more about detecting errors, analyzing these errors, correcting the errors, and at the end also automation. But in the implementation space, we try to provide a harmonized implementation experience for our customers in order to go to the intelligent enterprise. And our main goal is that we do this covering all the relevant SAP solutions for all customers. And this means that, of course, in today's world, we see customers moving to the cloud, but it's not just a switch that you are today on-prem, you go tomorrow to the cloud and then everything is fine. Most customers really have this on a long journey. And this means that hybrid is going to stay for a very long while, and it's going to be also matching the customer's reality. And in this session now, I want to give you an overview of what's relevant for a hybrid implementation, and make sure you know that all the key aspects of a hybrid implementation are covered and that you know what you're talking about. So it's going to be not system demos, it's not going to be exactly to the technical details. We really want to stay on the overview level. And overview level means, what do we actually do in the implementation space? So in designing the solution, you define what your target is, where do you want to go, what's the to-be solution. And also, of course, you design the way to it, because you have an actual current solution that you change. So the design is the start of establishing a single source of truth. Then, of course, there's a build part in it, because you need to do customizing, you need to do extensions, you need to do integration. So all the RISE types that you know from the project. At the end, also custom development in some areas. Then testing. We already heard yesterday in the keynotes a lot about testing and our new offerings in testing, and there's going to be follow-up sessions on that explain you how what these new offerings are and what's the impact. So I think directly after this session, there's a session with Wolfgang Platzer and Nicola Alech, giving you an overview of our new Tricentis partnership and what's in it for you. And then at the end, deployment. And that's actually where the shit hits the fan, to say it like that, because when you deploy, you move software to the production system and you see how your end users are using it. And that's why it's very crucial that you have beforehand made sure that everything is designed, built, and tested in a way that it doesn't affect your running solution. And this release management aspect is, of course, also a crucial part. And that's why we have a second session on how do you do the release management, and more of all, if there are errors, how to fix these errors. And that's going to be with Oliver Schleicher on how to manage the fix phase, also later today. But now let's go to the ALM best practices. Mike mentioned it in the keynote. We had our solution operations standards 10 years ago or so. I can't remember when we wrote the first ones, and they were existing and very appreciated by customers because they set the baseline on how we imagine customers manage their solution. And we thought it's time to renovate these solution operation standards, but with the hybrid solutions in mind. So we come up with this manage hybrid solution best practice white papers on hybrid operations, on monitoring business processes, monitoring and managing business processes, on agile implementation and maintenance of SAP solutions. That's why I'm here today. On the service delivery aspects for the intelligent enterprise, and of course also for the support processes. And here on the slide, you see the link to support portal, where you can get all of these white papers. I want to talk today about the agile implementation and maintenance aspects of the best practice white papers. And it follows what I just explained you. It's first of all starting with how do you design the to-be solution based on our SAP best practices. Then how do you run fit to standard workshops? Because what we see there is fit to standard takes over also in on-premise implementation. So fit to standard is the mindset that most customers adhere to. Fit gap is on the way out. Then, of course, how do we at the end configure, develop, build the actual solution? How do you manage the custom code? How do you test the solution? And how do you manage the go live in the deploy phase? And so if you remember all of that, you may, so the question is, how do we structure this white paper? And that was also a discussion that we had internally. How do we actually do it? And at the end, we said, okay, let's stick with the activate phases. SAP Activate is SAP's methodology on how to do implementation and how to do operations for a SAP solution. And it's structured in 5 phases. So it's discovery, explore, realize, deploy, and run. And we said, let's stick with these phases. And the idea of our white paper was not to really go into phases and explain Activate. I think the Activate colleagues do this much better than us. We said, let's focus on the actual implementation activities. In the past times, we called it the solution build activities that are necessary in order to get a solution running and keep it running at the end. And then the second decision that we did is we want to follow agile implementations. So we see lots of customers moving to agile. I know there are still customers who don't use agile, and that's okay. I mean, this is a customer decision on if you go agile or not, but the majority of our customers use agile methodologies. And we said, okay, so if we now write a new white paper, let's do it with agile and explain agile in the different phases. What do you need to do? What's our proposal? What's the minimum that we think you should do, and so on. And then the next decision was that we do it completely tool agnostic. And tool agnostic means we explain you what you should do, not how you do it in the tool. And that's also, I'm gonna stay here a bit on the presentation, because we do not want to make a function and features war, you know, to get our features out there and explain the detailed features of Solution Manager and CAM. We said, let's explain what you need to do, and then the customer can decide how he does it. But at the end, we bring it down to our tools and we explain what our tools support and which of the tools is relevant for which customer group. So, of course, this is then about Solution Manager and Focus Build and SAP Cloud ALM on the other hand. I explained the guiding principle, the guiding structure of the white paper are the activate phases. So these phases start with discovery, prepare, explore, realize, deploy, and run. And of course, the majority of the work is done in the realize phase, because that's where you actually build your solution. And we said, okay, let's break it down one level. look at the implementation tool capabilities. So when we are honest, the implementation tools and what you actually do in an implementation tool start at the end of the discover phase. Because in discovery, we're going to see a bit more, but in discovery, you still have not decided what you want to do and how you want to do it. And then at the end of the discover phase, you know what you do, and then you start with design, build, test, deploy, and at the end, operate. And in the implementation tools, we broke the realize phase down into two capabilities. And that's also what we see when we look later on at our tools, how we manage that. So in realize, there are two major things that you need to do. First of all, you need to build the solution. You need to do the configuration. You need to do the customization, the integration work on that, and you need to test. And we highlight the test phase here because we think it's very important that testing is done properly before you go to deploy. And actually, that's what we did then to align it to our tools. So we have two tools. We have SAP Cloud ALM, we have Solution Manager with Focus Build, and they provide different capabilities for the different phases. So, and one major difference right now at the moment is that in Cloud ALM, we do agile, we do configuration work because we see that cloud projects are more straightforward, more streamlined than other projects. And then in Focus Build and Solution Manager, it's more about the development aspects. It's more about breakdown of work, defining what you want to do, how do you distribute the work, and so on and so on. So, but let's start with discovery. So discover is like you want to know where you go. You do a vacation and you don't know where you want to go. So you need to find out what is the actual solution that you're going to use. And this decision, focusing on the right business solution, we have supporting tools for that. So this is the Best Practice Explorer and the Transformation Navigator that help you. Best Practice Explorer more in the sense of exploring what the actual solution can bring you, and the Transformation Navigator more on the area if you transform to the cloud, what is the right solution in the cloud to replace a on-premise solution or to extend an on-premise solution. And in discovery, the focus is that the customer and the partner find out what the right business solution is to be used for the overall project. Therefore, what you typically do is you access trial systems. You look at systems, you play around with the systems, you get to know the system, what it can do to you, for you, and the trial systems are a perfect place for that. And that's important for us, you choose the managing platform. And here it's the first decision where you have to decide. It's based basically on the business solution. So if you do a cloud implementation and you have a cloud mindset and you do a cloud first approach, then SAP Cloud ALM is the right tool to be used. If you are doing an on-premise implementation or a hybrid implementation with a large on-premise footprint, then Solution Manager and Focus Build are the right tool to use. So, but that's all coming back to what do you want to achieve, and that's why we have the discovery phase. So the discovery phase really makes sure that you know where you want to go, how you want to do that, and what tool to use. Then the next phase is the prepare phase. And I use a soccer analogy here. I'm not a big soccer fan, I have to say that, but I use a soccer analogy because prepare is like just before the first player hits the ball. So you prepare your project. And this setup of the project, you have to define basically your way of working. You have to make sure what is the goal. So what's the actual decision tree that you're going to break down if you want to say that the project is successful. You have to define the timelines, because at the end, even if you're working in agile, there is a point in time when you say, okay, so now we're going to go live, and you have to define that. And then you have to do a backwards calculation. Okay, if you want to go live, then how much time can we spend for which phase? Approximately, what's the team setup? You can start really defining your way of working. Then also a pretty important thing here is the system setup. Because on cloud systems, of course, after the contract is signed, you have to request the appropriate tenants. If you use an on-premise, if you're working in an on-premise project or a hybrid project from an on-premise perspective, you of course need to set up the on-premise system. You need to decide on the support package levels that you're gonna start. If you wanna do upgrades during the runtime of the implementation project. If you're doing cloud solutions, you may have quarterly upgrades coming in during the runtime of your project. So you also need to take that into consideration and plan your project around it. So this is basically the setup of the business solution landscape. And then at the end, we're also talking about the managing tool. So you need to set up and request the managing tool landscape. For Cloud ALM, pretty easy. We explained this multiple times. It's a 15-minute process and you have your Cloud ALM. If it's a solution manager, the question is, does the customer already have a solution manager? Do we need to update the support package levels before we get going? Do we use focus build or not? Do we need integration into other customer systems? So this is everything that should be done in the prepare phase. And one thing that shall not be forgotten, and I think the colleagues from CPRO Industries and Syverk yesterday outlined that, you have to onboard the team, because that's a key success factor, that the team is on board with the tools and the process and the methodology that you use, that everybody knows how to use the tool, that you do early knowledge transfer to the team members, and they actually can work when the project really starts. Because otherwise you lose a lot of time within the project if you have to clarify basic questions on how you actually work, who does what, and what are the different roles on that. And then it comes to explore. So let's assume you have prepared everything, landscapes are ready, and now you want to find out, what does the solution actually do? So this is where we highlight the fit to standard workshops. So what customers typically do is that you go into the explore phase with a high-level scoping, because you already have a very good idea where you want to go and what you're going to use. So simple example, do you use HR on-prem or do you use success factors? I mean, this is it's a basic decision that you have to take, but also there, what's the payroll gonna be? Is the payroll gonna be in success factors, or is the payroll gonna be in your on-prem system? So these are very high-level scoping decisions that you have to take upfront. And there we have multiple things that help you in that project. That's first of all, of course, the best practice content. We have the model company content with the model company services helping you on that. And we have now the intelligent enterprise scenarios, which are reference scenarios, for example, for hire to retire, lead to cash, design to operate, and so on, that spawn multiple cloud solutions and highlight the integration between these cloud solutions. And not to forget, there are a lot of partner solutions out there that help you in the on-prem space, but also in the cloud space. And these decisions have to be taken, and then basically that's the basis for the fit to standard workshops. So then the fit to standard workshops kick in. And in the fit to standard workshops, the idea is that you go through the business processes, you see what the system actually does together with the business users of the customer, so that the end users who will be using the solution have the possibility to provide you feedback on, are the best practices working? What do we need? What do we need to change from our existing processes? And by that, really, already in the beginning of the project are integrated. And that's also highlighted by Syverk and by CPRO yesterday. So it's really, really important that you take the business users onto the journey, because it's not possible that you design a solution, let's say for half a year or for a year, and then dump it on the end users and think they will like it. So you really have to make sure that you take them on the trip and that they are integrated from the beginning. And the fit to standard workshops are the actual right thing to do that at the right point in time. And also, again, we preach this since a long time, the single source of truth. So the fit to standard workshops are either the place where you start your single source of truth or where you update your single source of truth. Because the single source of truth is the solution documentation of the customer. So you design a to-be solution, but you design your processes, you adapt your processes, and the single source of truth should contain all of that documentation in order to know which business decisions have been taken, why they have been taken, what were the requirements from the customer, and so on. And speaking of requirements, of course, you capture the requirements. So you know what adaptations do you need to do, what configuration needs to be changed, what forms need to be adapted, and so on and so on. At the end, the explore phase defines the scope and the requirements for the realize phase. Now, talking of agile, of course, this is not waterfall and you do it once and then it's set in stone forever, but it's the starting point. And it's the starting point where you get the same level of understanding for everybody. And then later on, you iteratively can change that. But the Fit to Standard workshops are really the best place to make sure that everybody knows what's going to be the goal of the business solution and how do you want to get there. And then, of course, the requirements can be added over time and changed over time, because change is good at the end in an implementation project. Even if you know that, if you notice that you have done something wrong, that a requirement is wrong, you need to change it over time. Otherwise, you won't be able to have a successful go live for your end users. Then realize. So in realize, that's where the actual work happens. So that's where you build the actual solution based on the scope, based on the requirements that come out of the explore phase. And we see there 3 levels of complexity at the end. So there are implementations which are straightforward. These straightforward implementations are just best practice-based implementation. So you start the implementation, you implement the best practices, and you go live. So that's the ideal solution for a cloud in a cloud world. Then there's the next level, where customers have the best practices or have model companies and whatever, but extensions and integration are needed. So there are points in time where you do an extension to an existing process, where you integrate another cloud solution, and so the project gets more complicated because you have actual development work and actual integration work to do. And then there's real, I put it here in air quotes, real custom development, because this is the last level of complexity. If the customer builds real code and extends the solution or even modifies the solution in an on-prem world. And I think this is really important to keep in place, that we to keep in mind that we have these 3 levels, because these 3 levels also define to which degree you can or you should use agile. Because at the end, agile methodologies help at all of these 3 levels. So first, time boxing is the minimum that you can do using agile, because even in a straightforward implementation, it makes sense to do time boxing and do progress tracking based on these time boxes to make sure that when the go live date occurs, or when you go to the go live of the solution, that actually the scope has been done, or that you at least know how far you are and what can go live and what not. If you don't do a time boxing in an agile way, you're gonna probably run blind until you notice at the end what's finished and what's not. And then breakdown of work from requirements. Of course, in a straightforward implementation where there's not much breakdown happening, so you actually just do your stuff, then this doesn't help. But if you think of breakdown works into user stories and backlog items, or talking in the terminology of focus build, work packages and work items, this is a intellectual exercise that you do where you say, okay, I have a requirement that I need to fulfill. How am I going to do that? So, and the more you need to extend or the more you need to develop, this breakdown gets important and also complicated. And that's also where, again, Agile helps you. Agile is your friend in that way, because by time boxing and putting smaller user stories or work packages or putting work items in a sprint, this forces you to intellectually break down the work that you need to do, and by this make it more trackable and make sure that you see progress over time. And progress, last one, Agile helps you in progress reporting and solution readiness reporting, because by time boxing, by breaking down the work, you always see where you are. It doesn't make you faster necessarily. Maybe it will over time, but not necessarily. But at the end, it helps you on tracking. And also here, that's also something that the colleagues from CPRO and from SYVAC highlighted yesterday. I'm pretty happy that they had all of that on their slides. Agile is a mindset. Here, the tool doesn't help. So of course you can use an agile tool to get agile, but this won't work. So you have to get the people into this mindset of time boxing, breaking down of work, fitting everything in a sprint, doing iterations, making things better over time, improving your work as you do it at the end, also improving your workflow. You have to get that into the mindset, and then agile can really help. And we last year and the year before, we already talked about scaled agile framework. So managing these different backlogs makes definitely sense. So having an overall product backlog based on the requirements that explains you what are all the requirements that need to be fulfilled at the end, then breaking it down to team backlogs to distribute work between teams, and at the end sprint backlogs when the agile teams work in sprints to see progress. This really helps you in defining the end of the solution. And then of course that's not all, because here we also have to say testing should be integrated as early as possible. So always test what's ready, automate tests whenever possible, and include business users for early knowledge transfer. So really the testing part here together with agile, so testing in sprints, this progressive testing approach, so Nicola and Wolfgang will also talk about that really is important in order to make sure that from the beginning you have these quality aspects within the solution and make sure that what's developed, what's configured, fulfills the requirement, and at the end also is accepted by the business users. So including business users early also in testing during realize makes definitely sense and helps later on when you want to have acceptance of the solution when it's for go live. Oops. And last but not least, there are tests on multiple levels. So if you do development, so the largest complexity level, then unit tests are important and need to be done during the development process. Functional tests also need to be done in sync with the sprints or waves or releases that you do to make sure that the functionality works from a business perspective and fulfills the requirement. Then you have integration tests. And these integration tests are necessary in order to make sure that all the connected solutions work. And at the end, E2E tests that the complete business process works. So these tests on all levels are really important and need to be done in the realize phase, need to be set up because they will also help you later on when the solution is live. So when the solution is live, you can use the E2E tests and the integration tests also for regression testing activities. And the realize phase basically is the foundation for that. And as I said, it's on all three levels, the straightforward implementation, the extension and integration projects, and the real development projects that you actually do. And depending on where you go, that's then the decision in a hybrid world, which tools you use, for which purpose, and how you integrate them. And then deployment. So we're nearing the end. Deployment is the last step before actual business users come to the system and access the system. And here we have a poster in our office, handover to release is the point of no return. And I think this fits pretty good to this picture here on the slide, because when you have your software ready and you hand it over to the release and you put it into the box that's going to be shipped to the production system, you have to be sure that it's actually working software and that it doesn't destroy anything on the production system. And so the traceability aspects, so making sure requirement, user story, transport, and finally the successful test before go live is absolutely important. So when we talk about hybrid projects again, so we see this on two levels. So of course in the cloud, we have a very stable core. So we have the possibility that the cloud solution stays intact and we do extensions to that, and we just need to take care that these extensions are working and that the integration and APIs are working. If you're doing on-prem projects or hybrid projects between both, it's more complicated, because there we need to make sure that we have the actual order for which the transport's going to be imported into the production system. You need to make sure that it actually can be imported into the production system, and so on and so on. So the deploy phase is the part where you make sure that everything works together, and that you actually can go live. And one important thing is that you plan that up front. So you should plan your SAP releases and your customer releases upfront and make sure that this fits to your deployment schedule. Because at the end, if SAP ships a release to the cloud solution on the day you want to go live, this could affect your hybrid project. So you need to really make sure that if there is a hybrid, if there is a cloud update deployed to your cloud system, to make sure to do the testing on the release that you want to use for go live. And this release planning that's necessary, that needs to be done before the deploy phase, of course, but in the deploy phase, it's really necessary, or it's really important that you know what are going to be the releases, the target releases of my systems. Did I test it on the right releases, and make sure that my customer release can go live? And that's something that I wanted to highlight. I mean, in the past, we talked about 2 value releases per year for the on-prem system landscape. And we see that this moves a bit in the cloud, because we have, of course, the 2 value releases per year in the on-prem. But if we are talking hybrid, we have quarterly shipments in the cloud solution. And if you look at Cloud ALM, for example, we do daily deployments to our cloud solutions, and we do every 2 weeks, we do feature activations. So customers want to move to these higher paces. Also, customers also want to move in their on-premise parts of the application to these higher paces. And we see this, generally speaking, across the board for all the solutions. And I don't gonna go into details of CI/CD, but be assured we're also working on how we can make this more consistent, more streamlined for our customers from a cloud perspective, but bringing this cloud mindset also to on-prem solutions. And then, of course, the deploy phase, you plan your hypercare, you make sure that you do a right handover to operations so that you can actually go live. And then we are live. I mean, in the run phase, the software is live, and Sepp Herberger said once, after the game is before the game. So basically, the run phase has 2 aspects. So when we look at it, in the run phase, the actual users work on the system, but you have to do maintenance on the current, on the productive solution. So there will be new requirements coming in that should be fulfilled. There will be enhancement requests, and there will be fixes. Ollie's going to talk about how to do fixes later on, but this is from an implementation perspective, the important part that you need to take care about. And then there are, in the cloud, when we talk about hybrid, there are release upgrades in the cloud. Even if you have a very stable core on-prem, there will be quarterly, half-yearly updates to your cloud system. So, and the goal of that is that you have innovation that you can adopt. It's not just updating the software. I mean, there are now new features coming in, and you really want to make sure that you can adopt them. And then, of course, it's about real operations work, in the sense of operations also in our tools. And that's then setup of monitoring and alerting, integration monitoring, business process monitoring, health monitoring, and so on. And there's a separate white paper for that from Janko's team on managing hybrid operations. So let's take the last 5 minutes of the presentation for going to the tools. 2 tools that we typically see that are used and that are provided by us, of course, is Solution Manager and Focus Build, more for the on-premise centric hybrid implementations, and Calm, on the other hand, for more cloud-centric implementations. And with both tools, we are aligned with the activate phases, and what I just explained to you with the process parts of it and with the functionalities and the mindset part. Of course, we have different maturity levels here. So we have requirements to deploy on Solution Manager with Focus Build as a now pretty stable process, following the methodology, having predefined user interfaces, predefined processes, predefined configuration. So our goal with Focus Build was always that we have this turnkey solution that supports customer in their agile development projects. And that starts with the requirements management in the business process model, with our complete project to transport traceability going from a sprint to a release, having the different planning levels on there, having the roles and the organizations adopted to these planning levels. And then, of course, the UI5 applications that are specifically designed for these roles. And we are always improving these. And of course, we also know that we have the integration. So there are partner solutions out there extending what we provide as SAP in Focus Build and in Solution Manager with, for example, Scrum boards for multiple partners, with integrations into Jira, with integrations into ServiceNow, and so on. So I think we provide here a very good baseline that can then be integrated into the customer's landscape. And at the end, why do we do this? Because we want to have project governance and automated reporting. And that's where all the dashboards come into the game, starting with the solution readiness dashboard, the test management dashboard, the release dashboard, that you actually can see where you are with your project, where do you have problems in your project, what do you need to work on, and what will go live. So the complete transparency, starting from top with the solution readiness dashboard, making the drill down at the end to the details in the work items, or from the other way around, looking from a release manager's perspective in the deploy phase, making sure that everything has been done before you set something live in production. So that's what we have with Focus Build here. And then, of course, we have Calm. Calm taking a bit of a different approach, because here we're talking about the cloud project, the cloud implementation project, and customers with a cloud mindset. And so, of course, we do not have the complete complexity that we have in Focus Build in Calm. And also there, we're currently working on adding agile support in the area of task management, into process management, where you consume the best practice and manage your requirements. There we're working on the edit capabilities, test management, the integration of automated testing into test management. We already have manual testing there. And then change and deployments management, where we more look from a cloud perspective on that and make sure that we can harmonize the cloud transport management of all of these new cloud solutions together with SAP Cloud Platform and integrate it with the process governance that we provide in Calm. So Calm has also quite huge coverage already today, but we're constantly working on that. And if you want to know more, join our other sessions in the tracks on Friday to learn about what we can do in Calm already today and actually where the journey is going. So I would say, let me give you a short summary. The new papers are out. So we wrote the new Managing Hybrid Implementation white paper. And I think for us, it's now the time to listen to your feedback. I would really love if you read the paper, give us feedback. What do you think? Did we miss something? Do we need to extend something? And does it actually fit your customer reality? Does it help you? And of course, at the end, we have the tools that support the functions and the processes that are described in the white paper. And with the tools, we always want to fulfill the purpose that you have a unified and harmonized implementation experience, no matter where you are the customer. If you are an on-premise centric customer with a hybrid extension, or if you are a cloud-centric customer that has on-premise legacy systems, so from both directions, the tool are being worked on to fulfill the needs that you have within the project. And I think we are on a very interesting point in time now, because we see customers moving, and of course our tools are also evolving. And I'm really looking forward to the next years to talk to you about how we need to change things, how we can better support you, and how we can help you. And having that said, I want to thank you for the presentation, for listening to my presentation.